Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today, well, Midjourney 6 is out. We'll talk about what the changes are and what we're using Midjourney for in general. And probably there'll be a general discussion about image-based AI. So if you've got questions about that in the second hour, go ahead and throw those in. If you've got questions for the first hour, you can put them into Makana right now and make sure to vote on those questions so that we know what order you'd like them in. If you're not in Makana, of course, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and you can go to that URL. And you don't need to log in. You don't need to sign up. You don't need to do anything else. You can just ask your question right there. You can do that 24/7. So anytime during the day that you feel like you've got a question, you can go ahead and throw that in, and then we'll file it in. One thing to note is if you put stuff into the QR code, it's what we call a compound question. You've got 3 or 4 questions in one question. We're not going to get to it. so you need to put them in one at a time, as you'd like to work on them. So just something to kind of take note of. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Mitchell, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. First in, Douglas Carmichael. Audacy, or Audacy, a leading U.S. radio group, has filed for bankruptcy. Is this the shape of things to come for radio?
Go ahead, Bill.
Maybe a little bit. I mean, we know for a long time radio has been losing market share. There's so many other alternatives. When radio had its heyday, it was the great leveler. Everybody in my teen generation and even beyond through college and the rest of that would consistently listen to radio in their cars. It was the only real entertainment medium on long drives and things like that. But the landscape out there is so different between Spotify and Pandora and all the digital sources for the same kind of content. In fact, the whole music business has changed, and you had anything from iTunes through the modern ones. It's just a different landscape. So I'm not sure what terrestrial broadcast radio is going to be able to do to stop this ebbing of their audience, but nobody that I have talked to recently has figured it out. And I know that when I'm talking to some of my son's friends, not a lot of people are listening to regular broadcast radio. They've kind of moved on from that. So it's sad because it was such a big part of my life when I was on the air for those years, but I just don't think it's going to ever be what it used to be.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There's some statistics out there to say radio is still very, very popular, but you're right, Bill. There's a lot of competition for ears in various social media and digital means. Here's the problem with broadcasting nowadays, especially with radio, is that there's a handful of major players like Audacy, which used to be Entercom, used to be CBS, iHeart. iHeart's been in and out of bankruptcy off and on. It's just a problem trying to make a dollar on these stations because they haven't changed their methodology for running advertising. And that's the problem. It's a flawed system the way it's being run right now. And the way I think it's being run that's incorrect at a time when they need to be much more hyper-local is that it's all homogenized. It's all being done from corporate headquarters. It's the same from one part of the country to the other. There's no locality to it. So I think that's what's going to end up happening is that these stations are going to fail and then go back to being mom-and-pop operations that are a little more relevant to people.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think a lot of the large corporations that were taking over, buying up radio stations so that they could perpetuate one point of view, or if there were talk stations that carried syndicated performers, it got fairly popular, and a lot of radio stations made a lot of money for the Rush Limbaughs out there of America. For our variety of, overly popular talk show radio hosts. And I think that's where radio is going to land. It's fewer and fewer people are using radio for music in their cars because they're, playing their playlist or listening to podcasts in their cars. Satellite radio also took a huge chunk out of local broadcast since it's available everywhere, and you don't have to worry about it dropping out as long as there are not, clouds and trees overhead. But I think the radio business goes back and forth, and I think it's in a transition, as Mitch said, back to more local information, local personalities. That has an appeal now versus the pre-canned syndicated stuff that's out there.
CJ?
I just don't understand how you can cut your debt from $1.9 billion to $350 million and your lenders are willing to take equity. Like, if you're in that much of a hole, what's your equity worth?
The funny thing is that it's the difference of whether you're going to go under or whether you're going to restructure. So a lot of times your lenders are looking at what's the best case scenario or what's the worst case scenario. And so if they feel like they're not going to get anything out of it, then a little bit of something might make more sense. This one really feels more like a restructuring of the debt. They bought up this company. They kind of got themselves into a position, and it's not very uncommon for someone to buy a bunch of stuff and then find an excuse to reorganize the debt. So that they can, and it's pretty, I mean, in large business, I was surprised at how often it happens, and it's almost considered a business model. You buy something up, you buy a bunch of things, you consolidate them all, and then you restructure. You're not putting the company under, you're just restructuring all the debt, which is to your advantage. And I think that, but you can't do it when you're doing well. So when things are turning sideways, you restructure it. It makes you more competitive. We shouldn't feel too bad for the people who lent them the money. so anyway, I don't know, we're not going to cry any tears for them. So anyway, so it's just they're all making calculated risks. So I think that's the, I think that's probably what's happening here. I don't think that this is necessarily, I think the radio industry has a lot of challenges. I don't think in this case, this story is about those challenges. I think this is a competitive restructure of debt to allow them to move forward. I think this was probably planned when they started to consolidate those stations. And I think that they used the last couple of years to leverage that. So that's my opinion about how that works without being a financial guru. But that's what it looked like reading the article. And I think that radio has an opportunity. I think that the opportunity is shrinking quickly. I think the big thing that radio has to figure out is how to build its online presence. So it needs to be more than just a radio station. And I think that Mark, who's on our panel a lot, talks a lot about that. But figuring out a way to build something that's a community online that's connected to the radio station is important, because the radio station may become less and less important, but that community is still real. The second thing is remarkably, the radio stations themselves actually made this harder for themselves, because they put in all these things to keep people from doing online radio, but they may need to do that. So they may need what they made hard, because they can't really, unless you have a radio station, you can't really broadcast competitively over the internet. So as long as they have that radio station, as long as they have that broadcast somewhere, they can stream it at a relatively good cost. Once you take away the transmitter, the way the laws are written, it's impossible. Like the math doesn't add up to do like a broadcast. You can do what Apple is doing, but you can't actually make something work. So that's going to be the other thing we have to kind of think about. Next question.
Next question from Eddie Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. What are the advantages for video production of the new Wi-Fi 7 standard? It has 320 megahertz superwide channels in the 6 gigahertz range.
Go ahead, John.
It's not the channel width. In Wi-Fi 6, they changed the way that the end user devices connect to the access points. So they used to not connect concurrently. They were pulled like the old school mainframe and a terminal. And so Wi-Fi 6 was the real breakthrough for video. Although there's so much interference on those channels, that's the problem. It's not the bandwidth, and it's the mechanisms now that the way the devices connect to the access points specifically designed to communicate in parallel.
Yeah, it is that's the thing that's going to make a big difference, but we'll see. We'll see if it makes it. Almost everything I'm doing is not connecting over Wi-Fi 6 as it is, and we're talking about Wi-Fi 7. I've got very few devices that are using Wi-Fi 6, so we'll see how this goes. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and remember, the higher the frequency, the less penetration that there is through walls. And you can now probably with Wi-Fi 7, you'll probably be able to cook your chicken breast on top of your router. It's going to be great.
One thing that I do think is the case is that because of this multi-channel process that Wi-Fi 7 has, or Wi-Fi 6 had too as well, but the ability to kind of intermesh all of your APs is going to make it easier so that you're not dropping from one to the other one. It's able to hand it off. I think that's the big advantage that we're going to see in these newer formats. And that may really, end up being less drops. Next question.
Pedro Gonzalez from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma asks, Sony A9 III full-frame global shutter, 6K. Alex's answered prayers. How many are you planning on buying? 3, maybe 6? They are full frame and global shutter. Finally, a camera that is good enough to be a suitable webcam.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's definitely hitting an interesting sweet spot between the, I guess, the FX3 and all the way up to the FX6 and up to the higher end Sony cameras. That global shutter is certainly very important, and as Alex predicted, the next big battleground between perhaps Apple and Sony and companies like that. But the only thing that I just want to take a little bit of issue with, Pedro, is that I don't think a webcam really requires a global shutter. It's a pretty static image here, so we don't have to deal with the shutter issues.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this one. I mean, it's a great camera. It looks like a really good camera. I'm not sure that it is something I would need to use as a web camera. I actually think that the LR1 that we talked about yesterday is something that's probably more interesting as a web camera than this one. It's half the cost and smaller, and I don't really need that form factor for a web camera. I don't even need it for this FX30 that I'm using right now. So I think that is, but I do think that global shutter is going to become table stakes in the not too distant future for any camera under 10K, that is, well, I would say over 2,000, under 10,000, but really has to get to a point where they're using global shutter to make that actually happen. It does look like an impressive camera. At 6K, though, it's competing with its own camera, which is the FX6, which is a very, very impressive camera. So, from a form factor, the FX6 makes more sense in production. So it's an interesting. Again, Sony it's just like they just cover the market with cameras. Like we don't, like they're all the same price. They kind of do the same thing. It's very confusing. Next question.
And it's from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Apple's Vision Pro goes on sale February 2nd for $3,499. Pre-order January 19th. Will you pull the plug?
It's funny how Apple took all the oxygen out of CES without having to go. So anyway, go ahead, TJ.
I was fighting with it a little bit and kind of thinking, it's kind of a toy. Do I really want to buy it? And then I stepped back and started thinking about the possibilities and that I don't know what I don't know, but I know that I don't want to be left behind. So I want to be at the forefront of pushing the edges of this technology and figuring out I'm going to look for a place to use it. And if for nothing else, I want to be able to travel. Like if I'm on a transatlantic flight or something more than 5 or 6 hours and I want to have 3 screens. That was the promise of the Xreal, but yeah.
I was surprised that someone who is actually editing in 3 screens on planes right now in Premiere Pro with a PC with the Meta Quest, and it was surprising to me that they were doing it because to me it didn't seem like there'd be enough resolution. But they're very happy with it. They were like, I can't work any other way when I'm traveling. So, I go ahead, Bill.
I think this is the era of the big show, and I say that because of tours like Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, and I can't imagine them not going all in for whatever the next tour or for equivalent large-scale global acts on making stunning content for this display system and the ability to interact with content and things like that. I'm not going to pull the plug because it's just not something that it would be exploratory for me, and I think this is too far out. But I can see shooting differently, and I can see people producing differently once this 3-dimensional around you environment becomes ubiquitous because there's enough devices out there to go for it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, Paul, you can keep the plug, and I'm absolutely going to pull the trigger. 100%. Yeah, I'm in. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
You guys amaze me. Yeah, I think the Vision Pro is full of innovative technology. And Apple is really leading the way here in creating the paperweight of the future.
Go ahead, John.
Sorry about that. Missed my mouse. So I talked to Jeffrey. He says there's headsets all over at CES. And the prices of these things are just going to drop like crazy. So another 2 years from now, they'll be right in line where we can all afford them.
Go ahead, Chris.
For once, Courtney and I completely agree. Take the $3,500, invest it in the market, and you'll be much happier.
Yeah, again, if I was a developer right now, I'd really look seriously at it if I had an idea. Don't just throw something up there. But there's the App Store. It's very easy to port. A lot of the iPad apps over. So the App Store is already got 1 million already has a million apps in the App Store. So it's not going to be like people are putting the headsets on and have nothing to do. Even if only 0.01% of all of the apps are really dedicated to are really good, there'll still be more apps than I have on my phone. so anyway, so I think that there's still a fair bit to do there. I do think that I haven't seen the Vision Pro. Like, I haven't put it on. I haven't gotten to play with it yet. I'm going to buy one, obviously. But I've done a lot of stuff, and I've had the opportunity to see higher resolution headsets in the past. Over the last, this has been something people have been working on for a long time. It's pretty impressive. Like, when you see the higher frame rate, higher res, most of us haven't seen any of that. So we go, oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But it's a pretty big deal. and your ability to interact with content really changes pretty dramatically. And the big thing is that Apple built the pipeline to develop for it. And that's what wasn't really there before. So Meta has a lot of stuff, but it's a pretty heavy lift to develop for the Meta Quest. On the on the Mac, or on the Vision Pro, it's much easier. And I think that's going to be something that's going to make a big difference in what kind of things you see that are out there. But I think that it's going to be a pretty big deal. I think that it does create an explosion of headsets by creating something that people are a high watermark where people are actually impressed with. Everybody up until now that's released a headset has really constrained themselves to what they can afford to do, what they think the market will bear. Apple has been able to say, well, we think the market will bear this, and it probably will. Apple will probably sell as many of these as they can make for the first 3 years. They can't make that many. So it's not like they can make 75 million of them like a phone. They can make 500,000 this year. They'll probably make 1 million or 2 next year. They'll probably make a couple million the year after that. And so they couldn't go at that price. They couldn't go any faster than they're already going. So there's no reason for them to charge less. So they might as well just throw the money in, have it be like, well, this is what we think it would work. I actually think it'll get more expensive. So I think the next version, what we see in this version will come down a little bit, maybe to $2,500 to $2,000. And there'll be another Pro version that goes the other direction. That's probably $5,000 or $6,000. And once people are used to it, because it'll run at a higher frame rate and higher resolution. And so I think that there'll be people who use them. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I do have an idea for an app that we probably could all develop. I just watched a video just this morning about how in the weeks prior to the release of the iPad, that Steve Jobs nixed the calculator. That's why there's no calculator on the current iPad. It doesn't ship with a default calculator. And it was all because Steve said, I don't like the design. And Forstall, who was in charge of it, was like, ugh. He goes, if you can't change it, just pull it. So they had to pull it off the iPad, which I thought was very interesting. I think we should invent, design, and market the end of the world, perfect 3D spatial, blah, blah, whatever this thing is, calculator. What do you think, CJ?
I think PCalc has it wrapped up, Chris.
Okay.
Well, I think that when to your point, I think that one of the things that's going to be really interesting is things like math visualization is going to be really cool when you can. So I had a headset on. I think I probably put it on 20 years ago. National Weather NCAR, National Center for Atmospheric Research. I had to think about what that was. It's in Boulder, and downstairs, NCAR had they had weather simulators, and these are huge Onyx machines. Like this is back in the SGI days, and they had a bunch of Onyx machines running this thing, and you put this headset on, and there was a tether that came down from the ceiling to put the headset on, and you could walk through weather patterns and walk around them, and they could simulate these different weather patterns and look at them. We're stuck on this little screen, and it changes how you interact with it. It changes it, and it's going to, I think that's the thing, is that you look at the data differently when it's not constrained by a dimension, and so I think it's going to be really interesting to see, how that actually works. And again, I've had the opportunity to work in VR on and off for 25 years or over 25 years. And so I think that it's, you could see where we're trying to go to. This is going to be the closest that we've gotten to so far. Go ahead, CJ. Did you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I do quite a bit of data visualization, and when I thought to myself that there are certain things that I only do on a big 49-inch monitor because I want to see that many columns at once, everybody's going to make fun of me, but I want this for Excel. But then you think about data visualization, and when I'm sitting in my office trying to figure out what is the form factor that I want on a 60-inch screen on the wall versus something that's in front of you, and to be able to play with that without actually having to mount the TV on the wall, and be able to say, hey, what does this look like from across the room when I'm asking someone to make decisions based on this information that's up there? That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Everyone forgets that 3D stereo visualization's been around for years. Here's the advertising campaign that I think Apple should use to launch these, is they make a deep fake of Henry Fonda, and then they simply replace him and the old GAF Viewmaster. You replace that GAF Viewmaster with the new Vision Pro, and they've got their whole ad campaign ready to go.
You know, if they charge $10 for a Viewmaster app, I would totally buy it. Like I would, but I just want to be able to create. I want to be able to create them with my phone. Like this is like the craziest thing that hasn't happened is that there hasn't been like there have been Viewmasters made a kind of some of these apps, but not really. But being able to shoot Viewmaster pictures with your phone and be able to view them and be able to literally, we'll go like this and just switch between them. I'm there. I'm in. Go ahead, Bill.
This may be because when I first started in college, I was a music major and I took a conducting class. But the thing that's got me the most interested in this is the gestures. The fact that it has this, watches your hands and you can do things by pinching and tapping and snapping and whatever. It just tells me that they're getting closer and closer. I mean, from moving from a trackpad into all keyboard and not a trackpad, a mouse, getting my right hand off that and leaving it right here all the time on my keyboard, but it's still constraining because I have to be at my keyboard all the time. The promise of this, if it works, and I don't know, is that there is no device anymore. You're literally just interacting gesturally with Air, and it's doing functional things that are useful. I can see, like my conducting days, that becoming a feeling of how to get things done as opposed to a mechanical process of getting done. And I think that's going to be really interesting.
And when we talk about the interaction between folks as well, the other thing you have to look at, like we did this with Google Glass back when it first came out and we first got it going. And for a while, you could do Hangouts, and they turned Hangouts off. But when we did Hangouts, we did one where we had someone 3,000 miles away with Google Glass, and we were both looking at Sony F3s. And I was like, okay, now use this button here, and they could see what I could see. And they could see me pointing to it, and they go, "This button," and I can see them. I go, "No, this button," and we could talk back and forth over what we were, what I was trying to show them how to do on the camera, and that kind of stuff is going to be really like being able to train someone on how to do something, show someone something, or for instance, having a Home Depot or a Crate and Barrel or Pottery Barn consultant virtually appear in your house, and you go, so this is my house, and as you look around, it digitizes the house because it can. The LiDAR in there will allow it to do that. And it goes, and they say, well, I suggest you put something over here. Here, let me throw that in. And they throw that in, and so you go, oh yeah, that looks pretty good. And they can sit there and give you a tour of your house, putting things into your house while you're talking about it, and say, no, I don't like that, and they take it out and they put something else in, and then they hit order, and someone comes and delivers it and puts it in exactly the way you saw it. We're very, very, very close. I mean, you can already do that with most of the furniture items in Amazon. So it's that's the kind of stuff that's going to be really interesting. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, could the Xreal Air 2 Pro goggles with noise-canceling headphones be effectively utilized for immersive relaxation in medical and dental settings for individuals with autism, ADHD, or PTSD?
Yeah, I think so. I know that I leaned back into it and I have one of the little Xreal ones, and I didn't have and I thought it was very relaxing. Go ahead, Bill.
The only downside to it is I'm thinking of the last time I had a CAT scan was years ago, but I think they gave me headphones. And it is relaxing to be able to kind of find some sort of calming sensory stimulation in what might be, depending on what procedure you're having, a nerve-wracking thing. So, yeah, I don't know about people who are on the spectrum or what they need is what they need. But, yeah, I would think that some of this could be helpful. It would seem to me, because it was for me when I had to go through those things years ago.
Next question.
QR code coming in from Tim McMillan in Poughkeepsie in New York. Last week, I complained about Cinefex not working anymore on iPadOS 17. A couple of days later, they fixed it. Now it works. Is this the office hours effect? In any case, thank you.
I don't know if it's the office hours effect or not, but maybe. There's definitely people that probably read it or work on it that might have noticed it, but I think they just probably got a bunch of people responding to it. It's a great app. So anyway, yeah, glad it happened. A quick reminder, by the way, if you are interested in throwing questions in, you can either use the QR code at askofficehours.global, this little QR code here, or you can go to Makana. You can ask those questions and make sure to vote on those questions so that we know what you think is the most important. Let's go to the next question.
Here's another one of those QR code questions from Larry Avery in San Dimas, California. On Saturday, Alex mentioned Topaz Video AI. When in the editing workflow should its tools be employed? Or where in the editing workflow? At the very end, before adding effects, and when? By the way, it's using Premiere Pro as my NLE. Thanks in advance.
Go ahead, Chris.
So, Larry, here's my take on that. First of all, I haven't used Topaz. I'd love to hear more about what Alex thinks of it. I've been watching it, and I was like, I just hate learning new stuff. My fear about any outboard plugin, and I think I know the answer to this one, is if you ever revisit work, which we do all the time. I just the other day, I had to open up a project that was 7 years old, add 2 lower thirds, and redeliver it to the client. So if you do that, what you might want to do is process and bake different filters. So like, for example, like an audio filter. One time we had a problem with one of the audio filters that we used, and it just stopped working. It just stopped working. And then when we went to old projects, we had to like find new ways to fix those things. So a smart thing would have been to take the audio file, run it through the audio processor, bake it in, save it as a sidecar file, and then sync that into the timeline. Seems like a lot of work, but at least you still have access to the work. I think the way Topaz works, you probably are going to create secondary media that you then edit into your project.
Go, Bill.
I think this is one of those it depends things, particularly as to where you put it in your workflow. If you have a ton of core content, you come back from the field and you got a lot of stuff. Pre-baking it, putting it through whatever manipulations you're going to through can be useful, because then you can pick and choose from everything, and it's prefixed, if you will. The other thing, though, is that often I'm working on every single pixel in a large raster tools. I'm thinking of things like Neat Video and things like that. They took forever to process. So if you've got a lot of footage, applying something that's a pixel by pixel process through a ton of footage can take an incredible amount of time. I knew people who spent 3 days baking stuff in Neat before it was out. Topaz may work much faster. We certainly have much faster computers now, but I would be careful of that. And if there was a toll for processing a lot of footage, then I would not use it until later in and decide what I'm not going to use in the program, and then just apply it to that subset of footage to make me as productive as possible. But you got to figure out what your workflow is there.
Good, Chris.
Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating, Bill, than a green producer who says, why don't we just stabilize and color correct all this footage, and then we can start cutting. It's like, come on, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Also, come back next Friday.
All of it loud.
And also, after I made my first comment, Mickey popped in my ear, and he used a good term. Mickey, I hadn't heard that term. He said, treat it as a VFX pull. So like, I'm going to pull this shot out. I'm going to do what I have to do. The downside is, and this happens a lot at the level that I work, is I'm working with people that can't, they don't understand we're going to get to that process. And so a lot of times it's like, we just have to do all the effects because they can't understand that that's coming. So just do it. And I tell you, it's frustrating because you end up doing a lot of extra work that gets thrown out because you're editing. Hey, we charge for your time. It's okay.
Yeah, and I think that so typically I do it as a VFX pool, or I do it to the whole thing depending on what we're doing. If all the footage needs to be updated, then I'll do it that way. I definitely won't update footage otherwise. And usually our shoot ratio is so high that we would never be able to, we're doing 20-to-1, 30-to-1, 40-to-1 of shooting versus, to what we're actually going to use. And so it would be impractical. I had an hour and a half hour and a half video a couple weeks ago that was, let's see, I ran this through Topaz on a Mac Studio, not doing anything else. I ran it through Topaz, and what I was doing is going from 24 to 60. So I had to go to 24. I said add the frames. What I will say, it did it impeccably. Like it just put those extra frames in, and I was kind of stunned. There were a couple places where it rippled a little bit, but that's because the arm had a texture on it and was going towards you, and you would never see it at real time. But if you went frame by frame, you could see it. That's the only time, the only artifacts that I saw, and but it took 72 hours. It's like you started. That means you started on Friday and then you let it run all weekend. I didn't have to do anything on my computer all weekend.
On Tuesday,
and it just slowly cranked through it. So that's 90 minutes of footage. So you got to decide what you're going to do. But it can a couple minutes is like hours. Now, what I will say is that sometimes you get footage way ahead of when you need it. You do a bunch of interviews, you do a bunch of things, you know what you need. If you've got an extra computer that can sit there and just chew on it, just throw those things in there and let it chew. Like I've done that a lot with this kind of processing, upscaling, downscaling, degraining, all those things is if I don't know, oftentimes I have extra CPUs laying around. I don't have one computer to do things. And so I'll take a CPU and just dedicate it for the next week to just ingesting stuff and running it 24/7. And it's just kind of it's just passing through that stuff. If I get through all of that, that's great. The problem that you get into is that you oftentimes, what's nice about it is you get through, you have a pass. And again, this gets into what Chris was talking about, that the client can see it, but and it's not that bad. The other side of that, though, is that a lot of times little tweaks that you do to the system makes a big difference in the shot. So even if you did all of that footage ahead of time, you may want to go back and do parts of it again because it didn't do it quite as well as you'd like it to. So those are the kind of things that you have to kind of think about. But generally, I treat it like an FX shot, unless someone handed me a whole film, which is the case in that 90-minute thing. They handed me something that was already done, and all I had to do was change the frame rate. So that was a different problem.
Alex, quick question about Topaz. Is it? I looked at the website once and I was a little confused. It was one of those ones that you don't like where it's just the endless scroll of crazy. So is it a bunch of different plugins that you buy separately, or is it a bundle of magic?
The Video AI, I think, is just a bundle of magic. Like it just does all. Video AI is the thing you pay for, and you get all the things that are in
frames. It stabilizes it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a couple different apps, but I have to admit, I got to do frame. In this case, I got Topaz to do. I've had older versions of Topaz, and I've had Neat, and I've had other things like that. I have. In this case, I bought it specifically to do frame, adding frames to a film, and I didn't think I have to admit, I haven't looked very widely. I'm just like, oh, it does it. Like I read it, it said it did it. I opened it, I did a 1-minute test. I was like, it does it. I bought it. Off we went. And I go
72 hours later,
exactly. Well, then you. What I will say is 30-second test. So what I did, just so you know, like for people listening, this is how I approach these kinds of things when you see those kind of render times, is I went through the film and I grabbed samples of the film that did things that I think would be hard to do. So a lot of movement, reflections. So I looked for movement, reflections, dark areas, that kind of thing. And I made a little edit first, and I cut that edit out, and I exported that out as just a bunch of little clips together. And I pushed that through, and that was only 30 seconds long. And so I could see what it does in these different things. And then I made a decision that that's going to work. And then rather than, I think the mistake a lot of people do is they're like, I'm going to throw the whole thing in and see how it goes. And then 72 hours later, it's like, it didn't work. And mine took an hour, like it took lunch to figure out whether it was going to work or not. Go ahead, Bill.
I also see these as warning tools to me, and this is just personally how I do it. I mean, sometimes you're given footage, you have no control over it, and you just have to fix it, and I totally get that. But if it's anything that I touched or anything that somebody have a really good relationship touched that comes in and it's underexposed such that it has so much noise that I need something like this, the real solution is to go, look, when you shot this, your exposure was wrong. Let's talk about fixing that, because if your footage is really good, if you have enough light, if you know what you're doing in the field, you don't usually have to use these tools unless you want an effect or something like that. So I always consider it a warning shot across my bow. Why am I having to use this tool? And it usually meant that there's something I could fix ahead of that in the workflow that I should fix, because it'll make my life much easier later on. Sometimes you can't afford it.
I saw just recently. I saw someone with a T-shirt that said, "Why don't we fix? We'll just fix it in." And it says "post," but "post" is scratched out. And it says "pre."
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead, Mitchell.
Fix the problems.
I agree with Bill. And it's usually applied to a specific problem that you might have. And the thing of it is, if you do it online in Premiere Pro, for example, and you think, well, I could just turn the effects on and off. As soon as you unrender that by either doing that or rippling your edit, you got to wait another 4 hours or whatever it takes to be able to do that. So the poll is the way to go. Make sure you put handles on it.
And go ahead, CJ.
I'm just looking forward to the pull quote in the next Topaz marketing blitz. Alex Lindsay says, "It's a bundle of magic."
Bundle of magic. Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Next question is a QR question coming in from Sean Johnson. Looking for an economical green screen paint for a large wall. I've used Rosco green before, but at over $100 a gallon, it's very expensive. Does anyone use green paint from Benjamin Moore or Home Depot for this? If so, what colors work well? Thanks.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the last time I did it, I just took a piece of green screen fabric I had. This good green screen fabric. I took it into Home Depot and I said, give me a gallon of flat that is close to this. And it worked just fine. I'm not saying it is absolutely perfect, but if you know how to do green screens and you can light things properly, it will work just fine. The algorithms are getting better and better. Would I use that on a gigantic budget thing? No, I'd get the real paint. But it's not – color keying has made a lot of progress over the past 15 years, and I just think you should be mindful of that.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, if you think $100 a gallon with Rosco is expensive, try buying the original Ultimatte green, which was hugely expensive. I actually took a gallon of it to my local Benjamin Moore store, and they scanned it and produced a reasonable facsimile of it. But the problem is the paint, I don't understand paint well enough to speak about it intelligently, but the paint it wasn't as bright and brilliant and reflective as the Ultimatte or Rosco was. So you got to sort of accept the fact, like Bill said, that maybe it's just a small tweak to fix it, but you're not very likely to get Ultimatte or quality green screen from a matching at Benjamin Moore. By the way, my Ultimatte is in their system.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think, $100 a gallon is actually pretty cheap for green screen paint. You can pay up to $340 a gallon for screen goo or some of the ones that are certified for, green screen work. But I think doing color matching, I had some color match just to match the walls in this room, and it was almost $80 a gallon. So, color matching paint is going to be expensive any way you look at it if you're going to go in. And finding an off-the-shelf green that works is probably easier and cheaper if you can find that. But you got to have the right matte finish. It has to be matte finish. And it has to be consistent from gallon to gallon. Otherwise, you're going to end up with blotchy green screen.
Go ahead, Chris.
This is going to be a pitch to everybody, Sean, you included, to join the panel. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And I'm going to tell you why on this story, on this question in particular. Alex Lindsay knows more about green screen than anybody I know. He's very, very good at it, very accomplished, very opinionated. And watching him shake his head in disgust at the thought of color matching paint when this question was being read was priceless. You didn't get to see it, but Alex is going to tell you why you shouldn't do this now.
So the funny thing is that I kind of do it, but not exactly. So I don't use the Rosco paint. I use composite components paint. So it's digital green. If you go to digitalgreenscreen.com, composite components, Jonathan Erland. I'll be honest, I don't know what they put into that paint, but it keys much better. And it is, I don't quite figure it out. So one thing about it is it's not as blue as Rosco paint. So I think that's part of it. But he spent more time than anyone else. And Jonathan, I've actually had time to sit down with him and talk about it. And he has spent more time on it than anyone else. And it's just the best green. And they make Lycra green screens, which I love. What's great about Lycra, I have a big pile of them over here. They're stretchy, and you can stretch them between. So you get a 9-foot, and you stretch it to a 10-foot frame, and then you spray it with water, and you walk away, and a couple hours later, there's not a single wrinkle on it. That's the big difference between it and cotton, or pretty much anything else. And it won't have any seams. It doesn't have any. So the Lycra works really well. But we painted our wall. Now, here's what we did. The reason I said I kind of do it is, So the way that I paint the wall is I put 2 coats of primer on, and then I take a little sample of the digital green screen, and I take it to a hardware store and say, match this. And I match it, and then I put 2 coats of that on. So it's almost identical to the composite components there. And then I put 2 coats of the composite components. It does a couple things. That there's so much paint there, it flattens out a little bit. You don't see any of the texture from the wall at all, and it becomes perfectly green. And it keys. And then the other thing that I do on top of that is I tend to use green bulbs and mask them off, flag them off so that they're not hitting the person. The reason that that's important is that for me, the cost is not the money that I'm putting into the green screen on the wall. It's labor. How long will it take someone to key that perfectly? And I mean perfectly. So I'm not looking for, it's kind of like I removed the background. I'm looking for when I look at a green screen, I'm trying to get every hair. Like, for instance, I watched a little bit. I scanned. I didn't really watch it, but I scanned the Michigan game last night, and they were green screening over some kind of 2D background. And that's national television. It's the biggest game in college football, and that key was unacceptable. It was an unacceptable key, and I guarantee that the reason that it was unacceptable was because they had a bad green screen. I'm sure they were using an Ultimat or something else back there. But if you get, when you get down to I care about every hair on the person's head, and that's what makes it look really real. When you're at that level, everything matters, and there's no way to fix it in post, and you have to get it just right to get that down, and that sets you up. That set me, when I started doing it, apart from everyone else doing green screen, and it still does. I mean, I don't see very many good green screens done, in period, and so I think that's the. So I think that, and including feature films a lot of times, because their greens are all over the place. But if you really want to, but for me, I was doing 10 to 11 hours of green screen a week. It was really expensive to have it take a long time to do it. And we had it set up so we could just go whoop, and it was done, and we had it in motion so that it was looping. We just hit the thing and it just works. And that's the way you want it to work. Next question.
Next question is another QR code question coming from Winston McFarlane in Atlanta, Georgia. Do you know if Companion Satellite works on Raspberry Pi? I currently have the normal Companion installed on the Pi, but I'd like it installed on another machine and connect it to and from another station.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, as far as I know, it does. I'll trade your QR code for yet another one. Go there and recognize that anything that the Companion Pi, anything Companion can do, Companion Pi can do. And the satellite part of that is just an API. So yeah, take a look there.
Next question.
Next one from Larry Avery in San Dimas, California, another QR code question. Hi, guys. I'm using Premiere Pro, and I'm looking for tools, plugins, or standalone that can effectively remove significant background noise without affecting voice. Any specific suggestions? And thanks.
Go ahead, Bill.
We're going to start by trying to define background noise for you, because it can be a lot of different things. Some things are really easy, like if you have a 60-cycle hum or things like that, a simple notch filter will remove that almost perfectly, and you will very, very minorly cut into a little bit of the low end of the voice, but it's usually completely acceptable. The other end of the spectrum is you have a cocktail party scene where your person is talking, but everyone around them, a mixed group, male and female, and they're all talking. Everything that's hitting that microphone is in almost the exact same frequency ranges. So trying to separate the background of that from the foreground voice that you want is really, really, really difficult. The reason is there's not much difference that any kind of algorithmic process can grab onto. So that's kind of why most of us say when you're miking people, getting your miking done correctly so that you have the maximum difference between what you don't want to hear and what you do want to hear is always step one. Now, I will say that for a casual thing like sitting at your computer, the new voice isolation things that are built into most of the software. I'm sure Premiere has it. I know Final Cut does. Resolve probably does. It does a good job of knocking down the kind of noise they're used to, like fans in an office and things like that. And there are other tools. We've talked about noise reduction tools that do even better jobs than that. But at the heart of this, please, that technique of making sure that the signal is better than the noise in your original recordings should always be job one for anybody recording audio.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Bill covered it pretty well there. In Premiere, there are a number of different plugins that are native to the app that work pretty well. But if you have a problem going in and a really bad problem, most people apply a lot more percentage-wise of that plugin, and it has its own little side effects that come along with it. So as long as you use it very tactfully, a small amount, you're going to reduce it, but you're probably not going to eliminate it if you've got a big problem there. Another thing is try a couple of passes at it, like a low-cut filter to start out with, and then use one of those plugins, or come back and use the plugin 2 times, or go to something like Waves or an Isotope to have it. And I think Alex has a plugin he really prefers, which I don't recall just now, but those are the best ways. But everything like a fine sauce or ingredient in something you're making, just a little bit. Don't go too far with it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you didn't mention what platform you're on. If you have an NVIDIA RTX board, NVIDIA Broadcast, which is a program, I think it's free to download, and you can go to their website and listen and look at samples. It not only removes an amazing amount of background noise of all kinds, intermittent, non-repetitive and repetitive background noise, it also denoises low light video as well. It will also remove noise from your video as well as a separate plugin. So take a look at NVIDIA Broadcast if you have an RTX graphics board in your computer.
Yeah. Obviously, Isotope has some, Cedar makes a noise reduction tool that's a plugin that you can put into it, and they obviously make a lot of hardware as well, and they can do some of the removal. The one that Rich was talking about that I use, and I use it, I use it kind of at the end if nothing else is working, is Synaptic Unveil. It's mostly what I mostly use that for is heavy reverb, and there's nothing like it when it comes to heavy reverb in a room. Synaptic Unveil is kind of the big one that comes in, but it's like a $900 plugin. So it's like, or last time I bought it. So anyway, and I bought it for one show because it was worth it. But that's the one that it's a pretty amazing plugin. But those are the ones that usually those are my go-tos outside of the built-in stuff. Next question.
John Preto from Las Vegas asking, in NVIDIA's Keynote last night at CES 2024, they announced enhanced streaming.
What does that mean, John? Do we know?
Yeah, we know what it's got a lot of negative votes on this for some reason.
It's got 8. We're going +8. You're +8.
-3 in the beginning of this show. It was crazy. Yeah. So what they showed, they showed a bunch of upgrades to their cards, of course. They have super now. They have super models on 3 of their new cards. But they showed this beta program that they're doing in conjunction at first with Twitch. They're going to up to encode 5 simultaneous streams. As long as you're using one of the RTX cards, you could send out 5 different resolution streams up to Twitch. And then they can switch, and then whoever the viewer is can select whatever resolution.
Well, I think that when it comes to resolution goes, so that's setting up, so the 5 is the ladder that we would send up. So typically what that probably is so when you watch Twitch, it's really interesting what they're doing. They're going backwards. Anyway, it's funny. So what happens typically is you send a 4K stream to Twitch. Twitch then transcodes it. So they take your 4K input and they do the transcoding. They give you a 4K, a 1080p, a 720, a 540, a 360, or whatever. And that's the ladder, right? But what they're doing is giving you the ability to encode that ladder in your computer. Now, we use hardware appliances like Elementals and stuff to do that all the time. I mean, you might have anywhere from 5 to 9. 5 is a pretty good number. Like, you very rarely need more than that, but we'll do up to 9 of them. Sometimes you do a lot more depending on platforms and stuff like that. But anyway, so what they're doing is they're pushing the generation of the ladder out to the edge, which takes a lot of pressure. It does 2 things. One is it allows the user, the gamer, to have control over how it looks. So I want to spend more time on this, or I want this to look a certain way, so they can spend more energy on it. But it also it takes a lot of pressure off of Twitch as well. So next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado. Do you think the Division Pro will change how we consume content on our phones? For example, 16:9, when the phone is moved, you see other screens and margins, stage right, stage left, all with their own audio when the phone is panned.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I mean, maybe, but not overnight. I've got to avoid hyperbole here because, Apple stole all of it. But no, I think at the end of the day, it will be the beginning of a kind of a slow and steady shift.
Yeah, I think that you'll end up with people starting to create So one of the problems you're going to have, one of the problems we've had with is that you have a huge production pipeline that's all built around 16:9, but now someone has a headset on. What do you do with that? And what we actually found is that we could just use more 16:9 windows. And so, for instance, one of the tests we did with, just to give you a sense of it, we had golf. So you're at a golf course and you see the 16:9 show of the Open or whatever. If you look to the right, you see all the data. So what you're getting on the 16:9 show is a clean aperture. So there's no lower thirds, there's no data, there's no nothing. It's just purely watching the golf there. But to the right is the leaderboard and where that person is and all the data and the weather and everything else. So you look over here and you can just see whenever you want to look at it, you look at that. When you look over here, you have your social, your email, your whatever you want to interact with. So now that's all sitting as a big screen next to you that you can look at if you want to. Because one of the things we realized is people kept on taking their headset off because they're in an immersive environment, but they want to check their phone. And we're like, well, make sure that they can check it inside the environment. So we put it over on the left side. So now you're able to watch this big thing. You don't have to worry about it. And then what we did is when you got to the holes where we had 360 cameras, you would sit there and we would just open it up. It would just suddenly, those things would fade away and you'd be standing on the green, and watching the person, do the putt or whatever. But it feels like you're just standing there. So it would go to this, what Apple's calling the space, out. It's not, we didn't do it. We did it for a different headset, but it's, you go out to that and I couldn't, once I saw it, I couldn't imagine watching. I mean, it's hard to watch golf again, on TV because this is the problem is when you put, and I think Apple knows this, when you put the headset on, what I call poisons the mind, is that you see something that is possible and then it's hard to be with the things that don't get there, even though they're really hard. And I think that's what's going to happen. Next question.
QR code from Fred Parr in Kent, Washington. I work for a company that uses a Tricaster Mini to be in their studio and go out to QVC and other shopping networks. They want to replace the Tricaster at some point. The question is, can I use an ATEM to replace that workflow?
And the word would be, it depends. It depends on what they're doing with it. So lots of graphics, how much they want to build as far as external, so the great thing about the ATEM is that it's very stable. It'll do what you need it to do. You have a lot more I/O. So if they want a lot more cameras, they want that type of thing. But you're now outboarding. You need how are you going to deliver the graphics? How are you going to deliver a lot of those other things that the Tricaster does relatively easily, and that they will have to add other things to the ATEM. Now, what generally those other things will work better. Like one of the problems we have with Tricasters is that they would slow down the play out because their CPU was too high or something like that. And so those are the kind of things that don't happen as often with an ATEM. So if they're willing to put more hardware into it, they can replace it. But the reason we put Tricasters into studios is because one person could do a lot of things all at one time. So they may find that adding all those things might take more work. So, but I do think that what we did find is if we took a really high end, if you gave me the $40,000 that we're going to use for a high end Tricaster, I can build a lot of kit for that. So if they're doing a mini, they may find that they can, that might be a little harder, but you can put a lot of kit in for the same cost. And that was the thing that we did it really on a cost basis as well. Next question.
And it's from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Is there a future for radio stations like KOOP in Austin, Texas, and KUHS in Hot Springs? And are there others like this that you know about?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Mitch, I went to KUHS and look, they're taking DJ applications. Mitch, you ought to turn in your tape right now. Instead of doing that podcast, you can become a remote DJ on KUHS. But in reality, I think these smaller stations that serve a local area are going to survive only by not only serving a local area, but having an interactive. And that's the one thing, because even a lot of stations like the PBS stations that offer, great content like Radio Lab and This American Life, you used to be able to do appointment radio. You'd want to listen to those shows when they came on and make time in your schedule to listen to them. But now that they're all available online in a radio app for those shows, and you can stream them live and whenever you want, the immediacy of listening live has gone away. And so broadcast stations may have a problem keeping up, because now you can, if they did have a very popular program and they are available on the internet, there's no reason to necessarily tune in at the right time, unless, of course, that show is a call-in show. And call-in talk shows are still very popular. And as long as someone needs to be listening in real time as the show is airing and wants to call in and contribute their 2 cents, those kind of stations will still exist.
All right, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, both of these stations are community, non-commercial stations. They're not able to accept commercial advertising as we traditionally know it. And here's what's interesting about the proposition of community stations that don't accept commercials, is that the big broadcast stations, as we just mentioned about Audacy, are suffering on their inability to sell time on the stations. These 2 stations don't have to sell time. They just have to get people to support them. Traditionally, community and non-commercial stations have a very small but loyal audience that's backing them. And they continue to survive because of that relationship that they have. It's quite possible that because it's more of local, it's more in your community, that they may be the future of radio as we know it. And the idea of non-commercial might start to appeal to other people because their business model is a bit different, and maybe they can survive a little bit better. The only thing they have to do is that they have to get a little away from the block programming mentality that most community stations operate under.
Yeah, the hard part is figuring out how the next generation is actually going to listen to it. That's the thing you have to kind of figure out. But I think that they'll survive for some period of time. But getting online would make a difference. Next question.
Next one in from Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Last night, a blizzard swept through the panhandle of Oklahoma. The storm chasers were live, streaming to both YouTube and Facebook simultaneously. The stream quality was very stable as they drove on country roads. What did they use to accomplish this?
Good, Jason.
Well, there's no way to know how long their delay was, so my guess is that they just dialed it in accordingly, and as the quality went up and or down, the delay just kind of configured itself correctly.
You go, John.
The one that we recommend, we've used successfully at multiple different locations, is the disastergroup.us router. It's got three different SIM cards in it. That it comes with so much time per month, and the thing works like a champ.
Yeah, I think that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
It was a flat-out blizzard. I watched it on After Hours with a bunch of other folks, and not once did it skip or dribble or do anything else. It was a amazing tour de force of quality, and I don't know what phone system or live view or whatever they were using, but it was nonstop great.
Yeah, I think that something like a bonded, disaster recovery is one option. I think that the other one that is probably the most common for these kinds of things is a live view. So if you have a live view that has, and even with a blizzard, it's just, is the blizzard taking down the cell towers? So if it's not, and you'd have the same problem. A live view can take up to 6 or 8 modems internally. And then you can get an extender that will extend it for another, you can get up to 14 modems that it's all connected to. And for the user, they don't have to do anything. It's a backpack with a little thing that you put on top of the car, and you run around and it just works. And so I think that I have talked to a couple storm chasers that are using live views, smaller versions of those, but that's the big one. And if you want it to be stable, you get those moments, you want to make sure it works. We're going to be talking about Midjourney here in just a second, but just a quick reminder, of course, that we've got more to come. We're going to talk about ambisonics tomorrow. So ambisonic recording So we've talked about processing and so on and so forth, but tomorrow we'll be talking about actually recording an ambisonic and what that means and how to do it, and some of the mics that are used for that at different price points. And then on Thursday we're going to talk about compression. So how do we make the big image, the big stuff that we made, smaller? So how do we fit it all into that and get it all out there? So we're going to be talking about compression and answering your questions about how compression works and what we do, some of our magic that we add to it to make it actually work. And then on Friday, we are going to talk about, my brain just flipped out. I had it there and it just dropped out. Backhaul. So how do we get stuff back to you're at a location, you want to stream out to a far location. We're going to talk about how to do that. And so whether we're using satellite or fiber or Starlink or modems, we'll talk about backhaul and how that actually works. So stay tuned for all of that. And now we're going to jump into the second hour. Welcome back to the second hour. And today we're going to talk about Midjourney. So Midjourney is released 6.0, and I think that usually we get the opportunity to, when we do 6.0, it gives us a time to show some new images that we've done there and to see what it looks like. I'm going to kick it off by showing a couple images that I did over the last couple weeks. They're kind of in random order, so you'll just kind of get to see them as they go here. But it'll give you a sense of let me get this up here. Give you a sense of some of the stuff. What I will say overall is that the biggest things that I've noticed is you tend to want to use less prompting. So adding lots and lots of stuff to your prompt actually has it kind of go crazy. The second thing is that it can now do text. So I'll show you a couple examples of that. So it now can do it, not perfectly. It's still like, well, it kind of means this, but it does that. Level of detail on it feels like it has jumped a couple notches as far as the level of realism and detail that we see. And if you've got comments, if you've been playing with it, or if you've got questions, go ahead and throw those up there. Let me show you a couple of the examples here that I put together. So one of the things that I do is I use it to build little Christmas postcards that I email to people. I wanted to print them this year, and I didn't quite get that far to actually print them, but I started playing with them here. And so here's a Santa Claus, playing with his, recording, talking into his mic, doing a little bit of a check here. I got a couple of them that'll be sprinkled in here, some of the Santa Clauses, but you see an awful lot of detail there. I just did this. So this was we were talking about a bundle of magic. So all I typed in was bundle of magic, and then this is what came out the other end, to do that, which is really fun when you're thinking about thumbnails and so on and so forth. This didn't quite work. It looks really good. It wasn't quite what I asked for. We were joking about being, there's a term that in Northern California about being an agronaut. If you're very aggro, you're like, here's an agronaut going off into space. Anyway, I tried to do agronaut, and what I got was an astronaut. But look at the detail. Like, the detail is quite a thing. This is another one of the bundle of magics that it popped up. There was another version of that it just, it gives you lots of different versions. I asked it, I just watched Hypnosis, and so I said, well, what would happen if I had the dark side of the moon, but photographed by National Geographic? And that's what it came up with. You can see that the text works. I don't know who those people are, but it's a whole new world. So I put in, when you put things in quotes that has text in it, you're often getting the text that you asked for. But I didn't put that Star Wars in. It figured that out on its own. I got a couple more Star Wars ones in there. Here's another Star Wars thing there. By the way, I don't know what that movie is, but I want to see it. Like I saw when I made the poster, I was like, yeah, that looks good. This one was funny. I needed to have, so one of the things about Midjourney that you can do is you can give it any kind of aspect ratio. So I had these in the calendar that I made for all of our in the calendar that I made, you'll see a couple of these pop up, but in the calendar that I made to define all of the next year's, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in office hours, it had a certain aspect ratio, and I needed to fill it, and I had wildcards. These are days that weren't defined, and all I typed in was wildcard in the style of National Geographic, blah, 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 and this is what I got. Like, it just was like, I will go do something that looks like, and for some reason it's decided this was a wild card, which I thought was amazing. as you can see, the text is right. I just said, "This is fine." This is fine meme. So you have your woman drinking her coffee, looking at the store on fire with a little sign that says, "This is fine." So I thought that was fun. This was just a button. I just wanted a button that was industrial, and so I put that in there. So when we do this, this is Tatooine. So I said Tatooine from half screen of Tatooine. What's really interesting here is what we would typically do now is when we did matte paintings, we would over-render a little bit, but we just projection map this onto a sphere. So there's a sphere here, and we actually just projection map that on. And so I'm probably going to use something like this. I've been kind of playing with it so that I can do a shot of like the Queen ship or a ship flying away from this and show people how you do a space shot without, like, you think that you're going to map it as a spherical map onto the sphere, but that's not what you end up doing. You end up projection mapping this in Cinema 4D onto the sphere is really big, and you're just projecting it on, and so, but being able to, this is not as good as what Brian Flora would do at ILM, but it's pretty good for 15 seconds. His took a couple weeks, and I would still hire him if I had the budget. But I would, if I wanted to demo something, I'd be tempted to use something like this. Another "This is fine." You can see, as you said, it's got the "This is fine," but minion. So I've got a couple minion. There's certain things that I like to come back to, and "This is fine" is one of them, and minions is another. And when I combine them, so much fun, to have there. So these are really good, by the way, when you send them to people in a meeting when the meeting's coming apart. Anyway, so another one of the wild cards that I asked for. All I said was wild card, and this is what it came up with. I bought my daughter some Doc Martens, but I had to take her out, so I had to make a card that said, "I'm going to take you to go buy Doc Martens." so I just told it to make me a store of Doc Martens, and this is what I got out of that. I asked it this morning to do office hours. You can see that it still has some issues with text. It's not nailing it just right. But I just said, make a simplistic, minimalistic logo of office hours. This is another one of the National Geographic shooting The Other Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd. I asked it to do Makana. Like, what would you do for a logo for Makana? And so it made up a bunch of ideas. And again, the thing is it's not that you would use any of these. It's that you look at it and you go, "Oh, that's really interesting." That's an interesting way to think about that. Or, "I really like this." Those are the kind of things that you can do there. I thought it'd be funny if Santa Claus was meditating before he went out on his thing for my Christmas card. So I had him meditating here in the North Pole. Another Star Wars one that was, I thought, pretty cool. I had to do something where I was talking about Bluefin, and so I just had it make a image of Bluefin over a plain white background so that I could remove the background there. Another Christmas card with robots that are there. But I will say that the level of realism of what it feels like now has really jumped a fair bit, in this. Another one of Makana logos, which I thought were really interesting. This is, I asked for a Star Wars poster in the style of Ivan Earl. He was a Disney painter. So I asked for that, and he did lots of trees. And so there you have a kind of a different look on it. This is the confabulator or the encabulator. So the turbo encabulator, I asked the turbo encabulator as a 30s poster. So that's what I got for the turbo encabulator. I got a couple in turbo. There's Santa in the workshop actually building some stuff, putting it together there. But just if you really look at the detail, the other thing that is getting better is not perfect, but much better every single time with the hands. So we have the proper number of fingers and that kind of thing. That's been a problem in the past. This is Santa, in a jet, in a fighter jet. So I thought that was. But when you look at the level of detail that you're seeing, across the board here, it's pretty amazing, what it's doing there. This is a blueprint or a wireframe of the turbo encabulator, which I find to be a fun test subject as well. So these are just a bunch of different versions that it thought up while we worked on it. And again, not necessarily something you would use, but something you might put in a poster in the background or something like that. I was talking about geeky troll. I was talking about online trolls, and so it was like kind of geeky trolls that I wanted to have for a presentation. There's a couple different versions. Another version of the turbo encabulator. Another fun little thing. So anyway, those are some of the options. Those are some of the things that I've done with 6 since it came out. And again, I think that the interesting thing is that the text not working makes it a lot more fun, to actually do it. I will say that one thing that I didn't do as much in the past that I play with a lot more now is style. So --S. And then you give it a number. Like 250 is going to be much closer to what you asked for. 750 is like, you go. Like, you go do your thing. And it'll and you'll find that oftentimes if you turn that style up, it's a little crazier. It's not exactly what you asked for, but it also looks much nicer. It tends to work through, I don't know what it does, but it tends to, like, if you let it do its thing, you often want to change that prompt more often than I expected you to, that I expected to want to do it. Yeah, go ahead, CJ.
This may be venturing into asking the magician to reveal his tricks, but can you share the prompts that you used for maybe like the logo one or the one of the turbo confabulators? Because I'm always curious to see how those are structured.
What's the reference to the turbo confabulator?
Turbo encabulator. It's a turbo encabulator. So the turbo encabulator. You don't know what a turbo encabulator is? I mean, Chris, I'm really, it was. So the turbo encabulator is a joke, but it's been a joke for the last 80 years. So engineers would talk about the story is that the engineers would talk about it in front of salespeople to just totally take them down a path. But they kept on making stuff up about what it did, and we should probably do a whole second hour on just the turbo encabulator because it's actually a pretty interesting story. But then I think that Rockwell at some point it's like in the 50s, did a video where they did a whole description of a turbo encabulator.
I've seen a video where the guy rambles on and he's clearly
that's a turbo
just
encabulator. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
it's
so
an old film, yeah.
Well, there was one in the 50s, and then there was another one that Rockwell did somebody did one in the 50s, and then there's been a couple of them, but I think Rockwell did one in the 80s, and so there's a couple of them, but in the geeky world, it's kind of a classic. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm just interesting I was fascinated when you said do some Dark Side of the Moon thing. You added that to something else, and it was so far from, the original album cover was so iconic and so clean and so simple that it's kind of weird to me that it doesn't get the simplicity often of anything simple, and it makes everything kind of hyper realistic and hyper complicated. And so to me, one of the goals for me, for my life and everything, is to keep simplifying things. And it's just interesting that every time I go explore Midjourney, it doesn't feel like what I'm trying to get to. And I don't know whether there's a way that that'll ever change, or that's just the algorithm. It's using so many sources and looking over so many influences, and it puts them in there. It does beautiful work, but I just can't. It doesn't seem like I can control any aspect of it.
Well, I mean, I think that number one is that it's definitely not something that you do with like, I'm going to do it once and have something happen.
Yeah.
You're looking at like, I'm going to render something a whole lot of times, and so usually for something like the images that I showed you, it's not like I typed that and that's just what came out. I'm showing you images, like each one of those represents probably a couple hundred images, but they all happen really fast, so what happens is that they're, that I start when I'm working in Midjourney and I'm trying to get something, I'll start with a prompt, and then what happens is that I start typing that prompt, and I have some things that I use all the time, like aspect ratio. So -- AR space 16 by 9 or 9 by 19. 9 by 19 is your phone, so you can get things that look, for your if you want to put it as a wallpaper on your phone, it's 9 by 19, 9:19. But if you have a poster, it might be 3 by 2 or 2 by 3, 16 by 9, whatever that is. So you have an aspect ratio, you have the style, --S, and you might do 750 or 250. You might do raw. There's a bunch of different things that you might do there. And so there's a couple different places that you can go there. And so you start doing that, and we'll do it here in just a second. But to what was asked a little earlier, most of mine, I mean, I can get pretty complex, But a lot of times when I'm fiddling about, I start very simple to see what it will do, and then I start adding things that I want to do to it. So, like for instance, here's a couple of those things here. So, if we look at this, this is like all I said was wabi sabi, and I got this, and I got a lot of different things though. So I've got this was also these two images were created by the same. I mean, at the same time. Like here are two different options of what you're doing there, and then what I can do is branch out from there. So so here I can say I vary this subtly, vary this a lot, and I'll get a whole new set of things that are like it or not like it. Here, this was also created by that same feed, so it'll do a lot of different things here. Now here you can see me starting to play with doing more of it. I asked for the painting depicting. I don't know why I said Mandela's classic. Anyway, but I asked for the painting of the Mona Lisa taking a selfie, and then I gave it there, and I got the Mona Lisa taking a selfie or something like it, holding her phone anyway. I just asked for a luck dragon photoreal. So a lot of times you can, but you get a bunch of them. So here's a different version. Here's a astronaut that's there with all the detail there. This is a guy who probably shouldn't be hunting dinosaurs in the desert. He's about to get eaten. This is, but you can see these like the blueprint of the turboencabulator. So I'm not doing things that are particularly complicated. This is fine. There'll probably be a couple of those. But oftentimes, I will grab quotes from people and just throw them in there and just see what it creates, because a lot of times it'll make stuff up. But here's like a good example of something that I want to use in a presentation. So I want to talk about how primitive other tools are. So I said, just make me a cudgel. But I said I want a caveman's cudgel to be fat, otherwise I'm going to be a really thin one, highly detailed with padding on all sides. That gives me the white around the outside edges, isolated on a white background, and then I went in 16:9. And so that's the kind of stuff that you start to add into that puzzle. This was, I don't know. So this was like I took this out of a book and literally took what the description was in the book and threw it into there and just said, what are you going to give me? This is a high-tech control panel, Nolan style shot, which it didn't actually give me. And then over a white background, which just gave me a close up there. So you can see that it will, what I do find is that it does better when you give it, less than when you give it more. So that's one of the things that you have there. But and then again, here's like this is three people looking around confused in Pixar style over a plain white background, head to toe. It didn't give me that 16:9. So it didn't give me exactly what I wanted, but it's a great, like if I want to show how people get confused by technology or something like that, it's a pretty fun image to use, to pop up in your presentation. And so those are the kind of things that you can and you can mix and match things like, a lot of the stuff is, for instance, this is a side view of a steampunk brain with glowing wires in the style of H.R. Giger, Rembrandt lighting. So there's like three styles that I've thrown in to get that image, and one of the things is it knows what all those things are. If you wanted octopus game characters, there's octopus game characters that are all different. So you and again, when your brain, a grid of these, when you're trying to, it's not that I'm going to use any of these, but if you're brainstorming, it is super useful to just have it come up with a bunch of stuff, and throw those things in. And so, this is we were talking about the trolls earlier. This is a image geeky troll, full body over a plain green background, 20% buffer. So those are the kind of things that that I do. But when I do it, let's jump to the present. Let's see here. This was some more office hours, minimalistic logos. So you can see minimalistic logo of office hours. But I can say imagine, and there's a couple things in here that you can do where you have settings. So here you can see, you have remix mode. That's when it's popping up something in between. What my stylization is, my high variation mode, fast mode. I can do turbo mode. That would get more expensive. So these are some of the options that I have to make this actually work. I can go back to 5.2 if I want to see what that means. But I can do imagine. What should we imagine?
How about a minion riding a turbo encabulator?
Okay, we'll do a minion riding a turbo encabulator, but then we'll do, like, for instance, in the style of National Geographic. And we might be able to say something like, sometimes you go A7, S3, just because it'll start to think about short depth of field when you do that. And then we'll go AR 16 by 9 and AR S, we'll give it 800.
You missed an I in it, S3.
That doesn't, I don't know if either one of those matters. Like it goes,
I don't know if any of this matters. I'm just saying it doesn't say S3.
It could be S3, S2.
Now, if you wanted it in winter, where is it optimal to put, like, in winter? Does it matter whether you put it front or back? The weight it gives that idea.
My impression, and I actually don't know the answer.
I understand,
but my impression is that it is everything at the beginning. It becomes what's at the beginning is the most important, now you can give things different weight. I don't do a lot of that, but now a lot of times, to your point though, is I'll grab this while this one's working. This is how this, I go. And I'll say a minion riding turbo encabulator, and we can say in winter and hit return. So now that one's running. so now I have two of them running. Then I can give it a bunch of different pieces. So here's the minion running turbo. None of them really look like it's running a turbo encabulator, but they're great images.
It's remarkable to me how simple all of these prompts are. I looked at these images and would have thought that there was a book of text in front of them, and there's just not.
You can do that. The other thing that I do that I'm not doing here is I will put these simple texts into ChatGPT and ask it to generate a prompt, or I'll ask it to do it. ChatGPT will take this and make a much more complex prompt out of it, and then I'll paste that into Midjourney. I'll go the other direction with it. So you can use ChatGPT to generate some of the things. But what I will say is this didn't do a very good job. So now what I'll do is I'll click this here, and I might turn this down to, let's say, 200.
What's that number mean?
That's a style. So it's how crazy do you want it to be, or how much you want, because how much you want to let it run its own thing. Here's the turbo. It's this, and because there is no such thing as a real turbocabulator, it's going to make stuff up again. But I will
that was cool. And if you switch that to a winter scene at the beginning, would it be more wintry? Is that the
well, this is pretty wintry. I don't know if it would get much more wintry than this one. So this is this is our, maybe we can decide this is a turbo encabulator. But then what you do,
add wilderness.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
because it's in a city.
All those are in a city. So let's try that. So we'll grab.
It also might be interesting to take the exact same prompt and have two separate people on two different accounts and two different locations. Hit send at the exact same time.
But even if you do it, it'll be different. Like if I do two of the exact same prompt, I'll get two entirely different sets of things. So this is let's see. So we did this in the winter, riding a turbo encabulator through the woods. Through the woods in the winter in the style of National Geographic, blah, 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 and go. Now, while that's going, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go, I'd like another set of these. So I'll just click this and hit submit, and then I'll go, this one looks awesome, so I want a bigger one, and but I want 4 more of those as well, that I might just want to just see 4 more. Like I don't have to make up anything. Like here, I want this one to be large, but give me 4 more of those. And so what happens is you're not, this is a real, like I want a big one of that, but I also want 4 more of those. And, just do another set of these as well. Same thing. And so now what you're seeing is I'm starting to stack up jobs. I go through here and I go, oh, this one was great. I like
so V1 is a variation. You want to vary on number 1, and you're saying upscale 1, upscale 4.
Yeah, so this is when you see these, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you see these, it's I want to upscale that one, but I also want 4 more versions of that one as well. And then what happens is you're just going through it, and Now, I'm giving you the use case of how someone who is willing to pay $600 a year for Midjourney does this, because I have lots of credits. But then I look at this and I go, oh, that's really fun. Now I want to upscale and be creative about it. And so it's going to make it bigger even, but it's there. So here's my other encabulator here. Let's see if we click on it here. It's pretty fun. I can upscale that one. Anyway, so here's let's see, encabulator. This is just 4 more in the winner. It's still working on it because you don't see the little buttons below it, so you can see it kind of picking up speed. So here's, sorry, I don't know what it. So the thing is that when it just goes like what is this? Like it's just like this is just the best. Like because it'll do. Machine, and then just this crazy, it'll just do something like, here's one off, because it's just experimenting with different ones. Now, I don't know if this really looks like this one doesn't really look like exactly what I want, but I can do this, and I can clip in here, riding a turbo encabulator through the woods. But if I say, for instance, flying.
Oh, verbs matter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, and the thing is you just, and the other thing is you just save these, because who knows when you're gonna need a picture of a minion running. So here's some more in Turban. So I just said, give me some more, and it just keeps on making up ideas. And again, as a brainstorming thing, like this is another one that I don't know when I'll need this, but it's going to be great. So this is one, I took one and I said, give me 4 more. So it's 4 more that are similar to the one that it had before. You can see here how it's changed. Like this one's starting to go. So what happens is, and sometimes you'll get to a completely different direction. Like, so this one is starting to feel maybe like I like it, but I would say that I like this one the best. So I'll make that one bigger, but I'll almost always say, give me 4 more of those. Cause it'll just keep on evolving. And then I'll say, I like this one too. These ones I don't think I like as much. So you do have to don't do all for all every time, because otherwise you just end up with so many images you can't figure out. See, now it says you can't upscale because even I have put too many in at one time. Yeah, you're using. So here are all these little versions. And what you'll do is you'll start getting really picky about it. You'll start going, oh, I really like that one. But it'll be like the little thing on their face or whatever. Here's some more of but here's like 4 more of the minion riding, like running when things are exploding, but they're all slightly different, here's, but again, you get, different eyes, different things, so if you're asking for 4 more, you get, and then you get he's riding it somewhere on tracks. This is my favorite so far today is the minion that is just running. But here's the high res minion. Here's another minion. And so anyway, the point is, like, this is a pretty fun one. You got motion blur. You've got a lot of other things here. And now I can keep on going and just say, I want to vary that strong, and it'll just make more. Here's one with him kind of lying down on the piece here. Here's, it flying. It didn't really get off the ground there. So I might just say, do that again. I don't know why he's holding his arms out here like this, but Bill, to your point, what I'm trying to illustrate here, it's not that you do something and you just get it. You do something and you just go into this crazy, and a lot of times I'll have 3 or 4 threads of images that I'm trying to do at the same time, and I'll just be hitting them all, going, give me more of this, give me more. You're like an art director, just like an art director on speed. Give me more of this, more of this, more of this, give me more, and sometimes I'll get up to like 400 renders that are going on at one time of like 3 or 4 different things, because I'm going more of this, more of this, more, and I get that little limiter every once in a while going, hey, like you're doing too many at one time.
Slow down, hotshot.
Yeah, exactly. Whoa. And so anyway, and then you back off and you go and have a coffee and you come back and you got all these images to dig through to figure out what you like. The ability, and again, I don't use many of these. I use them in like presentations to be funny, because one of the big problems with presentations is they get dry. And so having little fun things that make people chuckle in the thing, that's the biggest use of Midjourney for me, is to put things in my presentations that are a little funny and just get people to go, it snaps them back to, having fun with the piece. but also brainstorming ideas or other things like that are something that I do a lot. Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry. I was curious, was your daughter disappointed that the Doc Martens store wasn't as cool as the card you gave her?
She got her docs, so I think she's pretty happy with them. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
What I don't understand is the stable diffusion, the method that it creates these things. It knows, even without prompting, how to obey the laws of physics in lighting.
It's magic.
And in color temperature matches. And even if you, like, this isn't Midjourney, but it's, this is Copilot. But if you ask it for something, there's no existing image of, like a cereal box coming out of a lake. That's all I put in. And, it knows to ripple the reflection. It knows the consistency of the direction of light, everything in that observes the laws of physics and the direction of light. So how do it know?
I don't know. we need to bring somebody on to talk about it.
That's what I don't understand is how does it know that, reflections are reversed and
it's based on the images it's based on the images that are fed to it. I mean, my understanding of it is
there's no images of a cereal box floating in a lake.
This is the point. This is why copyright's going to have so much trouble, the copyright things, is because it's not copying something. It's not building a lake. It's not cutting and pasting something. Like people keep on saying, oh, they're taking our copyright. It's just learning. It's learning like this is what happens when an image is, you look at millions and millions of images or billions of images and you'll see how reflections work, and what that happens. And so, it literally just learns what that does, and then you give it something, and it's building it, piece by piece, of what would happen next, But it doesn't even know what it's doing. That's when it goes crazy.
It knows that backlight looks more attractive than front light, and so it generates a lot of backlight. Have you noticed that it generally, especially in landscapes, it generates a lot of backlit pictures, usually more than anything else.
Yeah.
If you don't specifically say front lit or something. So
it's
biased.
It's biased towards backlight. Yeah. And you can see now that, and sometimes you have to kind of coax it one way. So I've now the problem is the Minion looks really burly, but you can see the Minion's almost off the ground. It's got jets now, got jet engines there, but it hasn't gotten off the ground yet. But I could probably, like, for instance, if I went back to this and said, I want to do sorry, I didn't show you, but I want a Minion flying high through the trees. High through the trees. We'll come back to that. We'll leave both of those in there and just see what it does. All right. Anyway, let's go to the first question.
Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania is up first. It says, has anyone asked Midjourney to create a 3D stereogram image? Remember Magic Eyes? Oh, yeah.
I haven't. Hold on. Let's try it. Is there a I don't know if there's a image Minion as a Roman soldier we'll just say Roman soldier stereogram. We'll still do the AR 16 by 9. Oh no, we'll leave that out actually. 16 by 9. Let's see what happens. Oops. 9, and we'll give it S750 just to let it play. So sorry. Flying high through the air, we got some different things here. You can see that now we're almost off the ground here, but the Minion now has wings, and some of them have turned. Now, if I keep going here, so if I say, give me more of this, for instance, so this is this build just to give you a sense of it. So I'm gonna hit this one and say I want more of this Minion. I also want a larger one of that. So here's my Minion now with both jets and wings, which is kind of amazing. It looks a little scary.
It's a genetically engineered drone.
Yeah, exactly. So here you have one that's off the ground, so you can see that they're
Maybe you could do treetops over the treetops or something.
Yeah, so I can go here.
You know,
and I
it'd be
can
a
go,
neat-
like for instance, I can do this one and say minion flying over
the trees instead of through the trees.
Over the trees, the treetops, let's say.
Yeah.
In a turbo encabulator, and we'll say, see, isn't this fun, Chris? Aren't you having fun? This is what happens. This is like how you lose hours of just, turbo encabulator style.
So it'd be a neat user interface if you could take like a stylus and just roughly highlight portions of the image that you like. Like, oh, I like these goggles. And then it would weight that or preserve that and change other things.
Yeah, and there's another mode here, and I just can't think of it right now, where you can select a certain part and say, take this out or put this in, kind of like you do with Photoshop. So you can add things. So here you can see a bunch of, now it's starting to go, it's like, oh, okay, I see what you want. So now you can see all these different versions of the minion, so we've spawned that. Here's the, well, it didn't do a stereogram, but it did I don't know, this one's the best. This one right here is my favorite. Anyway, but look at this guy. He knows he's going to die soon. Anyway, so next. So anyway, I haven't done a stereogram. Didn't seem to work unless there's a character that I didn't know about. So we'll take a look at that. Stereograms would be amazing. I didn't even think of that. Next question.
Ketchafler Griswold in Tromsø, Norway. You can now upscale an already upscaled image in version 6. What's the difference between upscale subtle and upscale creative?
Yeah, so upscale subtle will try to do everything that's the same when it's adding new pixels. Upscaled creative will possibly add new flourishes to it. So it'll keep on going, well, I've got more room, I'll put a little extra. It doesn't change it very much, but it does add a little bit more to it. So it's adding more detail into it rather than just trying to upscale it. Next question.
Ken Jordan in Surrey in the United Kingdom, CEO of Midjourney, stated his belief in developing technology akin to Star Wars holodeck, envisioning the creation of real-time open worlds by 2024. What implications might this have for the future of virtual and augmented reality?
I mean, I do think that the idea of being able to build something in your virtual reality, say, give me this, and I want this over here, and give me one of these things. I mean, 3D art generation is not very far away. I mean, this is building 3D models like to do this. I mean, in its own way. So, and there's already basic versions that are working in Blender. So you're going to see more and more of these things happening as you move forward. Next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts says, a quick plug for the Midjourney Office Hours session. The audio's in Discord. Every Wednesday is interesting about behind the scenes and the future. And he notes that it's 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Pacific. It'd be amazing to have David on Office Hours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we'll take a look at that. We'll try to see what we can do. Next question.
Kjell Fla Yersvold, I'm trying to get closer to that, in Tromsø, Norway. Prompting seems to be completely reworked in version 6. What good prompting tricks have you found so far?
So one of the things you'll notice is that I have pretty simple ones. In the past, I put very long ones in there, so paragraphs of what I want. And I've shortened them. By shortening them, it allows 6 to run a lot wider. And so I get better images. I mean, it's just more creative and 6 is better at being more creative. Sorry. I just have to keep on showing you, because what happens is it keeps on generating more images. And so again, I don't know what to do with this one. So this is the flying over the treetops. So you have the minion up here. You have some turbo encabulator ships that are, airborne. So we're now moving into what Chris was looking for here. These are, and again, I've talked to some visual effects supervisors, for instance, who wouldn't normally, it's not like they're going to use this image or even the design, but they might take this to an artist and go, I really like this look, but make me one that's great, and the artist will do more, with it, but it as shorthand for previs, it's pretty useful. Next question.
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, can you discuss the legality of using these images?
So far it appears, I mean, I'm not using them for any commercial purposes, and so I don't have too much worry about it at the moment. But it appears that using them, there's some lawsuits with the companies themselves. They're not suing individuals for using Midjourney. That said, a lot of big corporations are not going after, they don't want to be a big target. So you'll see very little AI being used by very large corporations to do that because the law is uncertain. What is pretty certain is that you can't copyright it if you just use the base image. Now, if I grab that image and I do a bunch of reworking, I could probably copyright it. If I did significant work to it, it'd be a copyrightable image. But as itself, it's probably not something that you can protect with copyright. As an example, I posted a Santa Claus on Twitter and a video group in Facebook, took my image without any attribution and just put it into their Facebook post, and I got a bunch of, people in this community said, "Hey, did you see what they just did to your image?" And I was just like, "Oh, that's what happens." There's nothing like if I put it up on Twitter, it was AI. I didn't own it when it started. So, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think the first legislation is going to be targeting attribution, so that if you use an AI-generated image, there has to be some little disclaimer somewhere that says created with artificial intelligence or some attribution that lets you know that it wasn't originally created by a person that owns the rights to it.
And that'd be assuming that it's some kind of news. I mean, a lot of people just put stuff up. I don't know if they'll care in that area. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. Do you think we'll see an API for Midjourney to integrate it into other products similar to GPT-4?
I think we're just getting started. I guess what I would say is that I think that all of these tools, these are early days. I mean, we're seeing some pretty impressive images, but very early days in what's about to happen here. So I think that you're going to see a lot more of everything. Next question.
Kjell Gersvold in Tromsø, Norway. It seems version 6 seems to be way more believable than when creating photos. Have you discovered any uses where 5.3 is better than version 6?
No. I wouldn't go back at this point. It just feels much more, much more realistic. I don't think I would go back. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Vieira, Florida. Is transparent PNG on Midjourney's development list?
I can't imagine it would be game changing. Like what I do now is put it over black, over white, over green, over other things like that to get it to so that I can key it out. But man, definitely a ping with transparency would be great. I don't know if it's on their roadmap or not, but it'd be impressive. Next question.
Well, following along right with that, Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana says, can you ask for green screen backgrounds or alpha channels that would work for compositing?
So far, the green screen has been hit and miss. Sometimes it's a pure green screen. Sometimes it's kind of like a photograph of a psych with the person in it, as you saw with some of those trolls. And so it hasn't been the one that's been most successful is isolated over a plain white background or isolated over a plain blue background or red background or green background. And you can sometimes get some of those things out, but it's hit and miss. Doesn't always work. I will say that if you get close to it working, you can then take it into Photoshop and other things, and they've got great tools like remove. So I've done things where I take it and it's mostly there, and then I take it into Photoshop and I say, remove or make new layer out of subject or out of foreground or whatever, remove background, all those things. And Photoshop does a pretty darn good job of it. What really is the back and forth here is to use Midjourney to get most of what you want and then go into Photoshop and have it correct bits and pieces of it. Take this out, move this over, whatever. And it does a pretty good job of doing that with its generative AI. So you're using one AI for the other AI. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, I'm impressed with the fidelity of the images from Midjourney 6.0. Do you think we'll see resistance from stock photo or stock video and clip art makers as text-to-image AI advances?
Good, Bill.
Well, I'm sure they're concerned about it. I will tell you, I use and buy a lot of stock video. We use it for comping all the time. I've even created full-scale spots for clients with it. The difference here, and that's exactly why I was exploring, how can you control it more, because we'll go through, even if we're looking for something like we're looking for a happy person in the ad, we might go through 100 of those images through the stock library, and we might license 2 or 3 of them. So I like the fact that you can generate a lot of things, but generally speaking, The stock image houses also give you a full array of hundreds of images that you can scroll through, and you can also do, I like this when you click on it, and it'll give you automatically a bunch of similar things, or maybe even the same model in the same location doing different things. And we use that more than anything else, this idea of a package of images telling a particular story in a particular environment. And we keep large, it costs a lot of money to keep those stock image things, to keep credits. We buy large packages of credits, thousands of dollars, that just lets you comp things very fast. And sometimes those actually end up in the final ads. They're so good.
Yeah, and the stock, they're not ignoring it. They're, for the most part, what it looks like they're doing is they are building AI models around the stock photography, but then it's all their own stock photography, so they can guarantee that it's all. Adobe does this with the generative AI. It's guaranteed that it is that you're protected via copyright, because they're actually paying they own the rights to it. So that's a different thing as well. Here's an example, by the way, of creative versus subtle. So this is creative, and then this is, let's see if I can get this right, subtle. So this is closer to what the original image was. And you can see that it just made some, it refined it a little bit. It just added a couple more, added a little bit more detail, moved a couple things around. So this one looks more like what you saw before, but this has got a little bit more, detail to it. So it just, as it went up, it said, "Oh, I got more room. I can put more things in." So and then you have to decide. I actually like the subtle one better, but you can make those decisions, as you want to. So, so that's but it depends on, what kind of, and again, a lot of times I have a tendency to do both. Like I just go, give me all the options. Good, Courtney.
Yeah, back to the original question. I think the stock photo image people are a little bit worried, because one thing that you may have to pay, that their stake in trade was, they're buying out a particular model release so that you don't have to pay residuals to humans that appear in their stock photos. And AI can generate millions of different humans that have they may look similar to someone, or it may remind you of someone, but they're not photographs and they're not owned by anyone. So I think that's going to take a lot of the business away from the stock photos. If you're looking for stock photos of, people in an office sitting around the water cooler, those kind of images, which you used to have to pay a stock photo for, because they could give you cleared images that you didn't have to worry about one of the models, coming after you in court.
Well, but again, I think that one of the things that they can do now is that they're using all those images to give you their own AI that will be based on those models. And it means that they own the copyright. And so they're still trying to stay in the game by just using their huge libraries and making it available. They're not trying to fight. I think the stock photography has probably been the most aggressive about, like, hey, we're not going to be able to stop this. Let's figure out how to use this giant library that we have to build something else. And so I think that that's going to be, because one of the things that's really interesting is when you have more focused systems that Stable Diffusion's working on, which is that what they're doing, you get more focused results as well. So it'll be interesting. Anyway, there's your update. It's pretty impressive, and it does a lot of really interesting things. It's 6.0 is another big jump forward over it. I was looking at old prompts. You can go now to their website and look at the prompts you did a year ago or a year and a half ago or whatever, and then grab those prompts and put them into a new one. And I'm kind of amazed if you go from like 3.0, which we thought was like, wow, look at this, to now it's night and day. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, have you looked at what DALL-E 2 and what Microsoft has been doing? Because now they've incorporated that into Copilots and everything, and it's free. And it's come along quite a ways. I think DALL-E 3 or something. It's not up to Midjourney's capabilities, and I think you can only generate 1024 by 1024. images.
Yeah, the resolution's much lower, and the fidelity is not as good, but you can have discussions with it. So what you can say is with ChatGPT, you go in and go, give me this, but then say, make the eyes bigger or make this smaller or take this away. And you don't have to sit there and try to figure out another prompt. You just tell it what you want.
Right. Yeah.
And it just starts moving those things around. It doesn't do it perfectly, but it does it pretty well. I mean, all of these are like, kind of like working with a designer that's on mushrooms all the time. Like you just, kind of like you ask for something and then they do something, and sometimes it's what you asked for, and sometimes it's like, what's the color of the sky in your world? So anyway, so I think that's part of the challenge is you have to learn to dance with whatever they're taking while they're drawing, whatever the computer's taking while it's drawing. You have to kind of dance with that. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Would there be any way you can generate multiple frames in succession with Midjourney to compile a flipbook animation?
There's other apps that are doing that. So Runway AI is one of the ones that's doing more 3D stuff, but there is a couple different ones. I don't know them off the top of my head, that you can take your Midjourney image and put it into that, and it will animate pieces of it. You can give it commands like, here's an image, but I want you to do this, and they'll animate it. So there are definitely other tools that are out there that will let you run down that path. So, and it's coming. And again, I'm not as excited about using it for final work as I am about concept work, the idea of doing storyboards, the idea of doing, those types of things I'm pretty excited about. And again, what I've so far, when I'm talking to people, it hasn't replaced their need for artists. It just shortens the amount of time it takes to talk to them. Like, here's a concept, now work with that. That saves weeks of that artist's time of going down paths like, no, it's not exactly what I wanted. Now it's like, I like this feel, but I don't like this, and this. And we used to do that all the time with photos. Like, here's an ad that I really like, but take this out, put this in, take this out, whatever, And so I think that's the big thing is Midjourney lets you experiment with those things. Anyway, there you go. There's our day. Tomorrow we'll be talking about ambisonic recording. So stay tuned for all of that. And we just want to thank everyone who works on this little project here. So thank you to the producers. We can't do this without you. This is a really short show if you don't ask any questions. So make sure to keep on asking those questions. A reminder that you can, of course, ask those questions any time of the day, 7 days a week, 24/7. You can do it in askofficehours.global. So askofficehours.global, you can put those in, and then we feed them all in the morning so that we can kind of work through that process. And thanks to the incredible panelists who make the whole show work as well. Can't do this without you either. And so great first hour, great second hour. So thank you so much for showing up and giving your time to everyone to make this conversation possible. And thanks to the incredible team, the dev teams, the management teams, the production teams that actually are required every single day. It takes like 15, 20 people to turn this thing on every morning. And there's a lot of people volunteering their time, and we really appreciate your contribution. We traveled 47,000 miles today, 77,000 kilometers, and that is 380 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. It's rare. It's kind of addicting. I'm just going to warn you if you get into it and start to... I looked at it, because I have to pay for it every year. I looked at the bill and I was like, am I really going to do that again? I was like, yeah.
I mean, if you don't, what are you going to do with all your time?
I know. It's
just have Midjourney create an image of a credit card with a number on it.
Exactly. Charge Midjourney back. Create some kind of... I do kind of want to print those confabulator images. Just put them on.
I like all the Midjourney generated trailers in the style of Wes Anderson that it creates. Those are great. And there's
this whole hour I've been asking Firefly to create a turbo encabulator. The brand new version